I'm seeing Derek.
I'm right here, Johannes. How's it?
So
are you ready to rock and roll? Shall we?
I'm ready.
Wait?
I'm sharing my screen. Are you seeing it?
Yeah, I'm good here.
Oh, cool.
I don't know if it's really any introductions are necessary. So I mean, shall we just
wait?
Oh,
I see.
But shall we wait just for another 3 minutes, just okay, so in case there are other folk on the other side who want to.
I see we're ahead. I hadn't realized that.
Yeah, we're a bit ahead of schedule. So let's do that. Thanks for your comments on my presentation and the amplifier and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing yours.
Yeah, well, if there's nobody else wanting to chat, then maybe let me link from yours through Chepo's to mine. You were saying that one needs to have a consistent learning stream and build on what we learned, and you pointed out that we'd sort of almost forgotten what we learned during Fees Must Fall. Now, interestingly enough, that didn't happen in my faculty, and I think to a large extent that's because I was a professor of e-learning at that time. So when Fees Must Fall happened the first time, and we had things like students couldn't come to campus because in Cape Town there's only 2 highways, you block them, nobody can get there. I then remembered a student of mine in the early 2000s, Michal Giladi. She was from Israel. And she told us that they used e-learning for that very purpose, that for every day there was an echo of what was happening in class online. So that if there were some sort of attack and students couldn't come to class, they could seamlessly go online. It would also mean some students would be in class and some would be at home, but it would all be seamless. And I remembered that from the early 2000s, so that when Fees Must Fall hit us, I immediately gave instruction that in my faculty, there would be, everybody would plan for at least a 2-week interruption at any given time. When you plan anything, you need to have a 2-week backup plan. And so what happened to us at CPUT was...
Johannes, I'm going to interrupt your story. I think that's fascinating. It is 9:31. Do you want to start with the presentation?
Yes, well, I'll carry on from the one into the other because it's almost what's going to happen. And so what happened at CPUT, in pure irony, is we had a flare-up of Fees Must Fall first, which made us close campus a week early. So we had to say to students, we're going into emergency teaching, go home. While the students were at home, lockdown happened. So we just couldn't get them back. But we had already, as a faculty, we had already moved into, so for us it was seamless. And the thing that we had underpinning the whole thing was WhatsApp. When Fees Must Fall first happened, we started WhatsApp groups for every single class. And so we never missed any students because they were always available on WhatsApp. So what I'm going to show you here is what our strategy was for no student left behind, because you will all remember that was a big buzzword during the early phase of the pandemic, no student left behind. And we thought, okay, so if we're going to do that, how do we blend or do multimodal learning so that we can get that all done? And because I'm an instructional designer by training, I did analysis, design, development, implementation, evaluation. And you will remember, Derek, that we always used to put quality assurance, well, we used to put formative assessment in the middle. But when one works at a university, you replace that with university words. So I put quality assurance in the middle, which of course pleased the quality unit no end. In the analysis phase, what had happened was in our faculty, we had started doing extreme module makeovers for constructive alignment. And we started looking at who the student is, what the lecturer does, and what the student does. And then only what technology can be used to ensure no student is left behind. So we did a complete student and lecturer approach, and it was activity-based, and then only did we look at our technology. And what we also did a whole lot of is collaborative teams so that students could support one another. And we managed to get a 24/7 type of support by WhatsApp. And we used what our Deputy Vice Chancellor called a carousel model. And that would simply mean that in our faculty, we called it buses. Those students who were ready to roll, they got on the first bus and they started working. Then we had a second bus for those students who needed a little bit more help. And then finally, we had a group of taxis that would, and I'm talking about virtual buses, virtual taxis that mopped up the few latecomers right at the end. The most important thing that we realized that we had to move from assessment of learning to assessment for learning. And so we drove this whole thing through assessment. We kept on assessing students. Once you're competent, then you can leave or you can carry on. So what we also did was we had smaller assessment more frequently. We had open submission dates and we had support based on results. So the faster you could run, the happier we were, because then we didn't have to look after you. We could use that time to look for the rest. So it wasn't, as Teppo said, just a dumping of stuff on the LMS. The LMS had already dumped because we've been teaching via the LMS for years and years. The only thing we did now was we supported students through other means. Then finally, we had LinkedIn, Blackboard Analytics to do a lot of monitoring. We have a customer relations information system, and the dean actually joined myself, in other words, joined a SRC WhatsApp group to see what problems were happening so that we could address them before they happened. Out of that, you will remember my little model that said, when do you do constructivism and when do you do objectivism or behaviorism? And I said that the two are not parallel to one another. They lie in 4 quadrants. So where you are high with constructivism, that's where you do construction. And that's where fashion design students suddenly had to construct garments using newspaper because we didn't have cloth for them to use. And we discovered you could do that. Injection is a stimulus response stuff. That's where we put stuff on Blackboard or on YouTube and gave them little tests on Blackboard to make sure that they could understand what they were doing. So that was the injection. Immersion is the domain of work integrated learning, where you learn the hard way. And what we did there was to get students give us logbooks and blogs and so on to explain to us where they were and what, and then checklists to see how far they had achieved what they wanted to do. And integration is the model that I'll show you in a while, where you decide which one of those is the best type to do it. Then to decide how we're going to do that, how we're going to populate that carousel of ours, we found 4 different knowledge types. And those knowledge types map one-on-one onto the 4-quadrant framework that I showed you now. So when knowledge is known and easy, cause and effect relationships are easy, it's predictable, we know what best practice is, we're teaching standard operating procedures, then you just teach direct instruction. Tell them, make a video, watch the video, test. When knowledge is complex and you're needing to find patterns that may not repeat, that's when you give people construction tasks. You give them Lego blocks, you give them newspaper, as I said, for the fashion students and so on, and they have to learn by doing after having been given some. And remember, this is the constructivist, so there's a whole lot of scaffolding that needs to be done there. When there's no chaos, when there's no cause and effect relationships, that's over here when you're in the chaos quadrant. That's where students are actually doing crisis management, and that's where a lot of support is necessary. That's where we found the WhatsApp groups particularly useful. Student could say, can you help me with this? And even before the lecturer is there, his classmates would help. And then our planned instruction, which is the one I'm going to now, works in the knowable domain, where you analyze every knowledge every item that you're wanting to teach, and you find out, is that complex, is it chaos, is it known, and how am I going to blend between instructivism and constructivism to get there. This is just a little picture I wanted to show you. Kelly Ellender once had a look to see where lecturers really work. And we found that some of them work highly constructivist. There are some people like me who do chaos, but the majority of lecturers still like direct instruction, sit there and teach. But it is quite interesting how good the instruction part of that is already becoming. And then here's the model. that I thought I would share with you, and it takes us directly to the end of my talk. So we just make a thing like this, and you can populate this differently. But what we're saying is if we're dealing with known knowledge, then tutorials and drills work. And the technologies that we use for that is lectures, books, videos, and PowerPoint. And the platform could be LinkedIn Learning, it could be Blackboard Collaborate, it could be Blackboard, it could be Collaborate, it could be YouTube. If it's complex knowledge that we're using, then the methods would be construction and exploration. And you'll use construction kits, which in our case was a newspaper, spreadsheets, and you'd work in a workshop, a studio, or a computer lab. So that would be, and those could be virtual or actual. When your knowledge is knowable, that's when you have puzzles, discussions, and debates, where we use games and discussion tools to make that happen. And that's where, as I said, WhatsApp becomes important, Collaborate, and we do Kahoot for games and so on. And then finally, in the chaos quadrant, that's where field trips happen, that's where work integrated learning happens. And so that's where we really do blogs, assessments, and we do Blackboard, LinkedIn Learning, and responders. I must say, I should put WhatsApp in here as well. So that then briefly is the model that I wanted to share. I put, when I dumped the slide, I don't know whether everybody has access to these slides, but directly above the slide, I actually put a link to, let me just get there. Let me just, I have no idea how to get out of this. Okay, on this UP2U over here, I have a PDF file, which is a thing I did in academia letters. It's 8 pages, so if you Google for a decision framework for blended learning in the pandemic, you'll get it. Otherwise, it's in this repository. I put it there for anybody who wants it. And that then is my 10 minutes, which leaves us 5 minutes for questions.
You're a model presenter. Thanks, Johannes.
Thank you.
I've been looking through the chat to see if there have been any questions, and I haven't got any there. If anybody wants to turn on their mic and ask a question, they're welcome to. But can I kick off with just my first observation is clearly you're talking here about not just about technology or pedagogies or platforms. You're also talking about change management here.
Exactly. Yeah.
And to me, change management almost seems 1,000 times harder than any of these little bits that you're talking about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Of course, the way in which COVID made change management for us was just adapt or die. So, but I mean, to me, the interesting thing is, and I've got doctoral students working on that, is how do we prevent people from just sliding back? Because I can see that happening already. Yes. There are deans already saying, I want my staff in the office. The pandemic's gone, into the office you come, which means we're losing 2 hours of valuable working time on the road again.
Just a comment from Murray. I think she might have meant it for everybody, that your talk did justice to the complexity we find ourselves in.
Thank you. I see Dennis says, yeah, he likes the mapping for the different types of knowledge. Exactly. Now, Dennis, I'm in the process together with Ronnie Aylward to add one more level to this, and that is where the learner is. So if the learner is a very beginner with very little knowledge, then you need to go into the known quadrant. You need to just teach, because otherwise you'll just confuse the daylights out of the learner. Once you've taught the learner a little bit, they need to explore and play around and feel free to make mistakes. And so you then go into the chaos quadrant and you allow the learners to, once they start feeling a little bit more comfortable with that chaos, you move them up into the complex and they start constructing their own. And once that's happened, we're back into the integration quadrant where the learner himself can make decisions as to what am I going to do more of. I always like a sort of a, what's that called, Darwinian learning. If it works, do more of it. if it doesn't, stop doing it immediately, which is what you were talking about, those 3 questions that you made there. It's also sort of a Darwinian thing, what you want to amplify, what you want to retire, and what you want to create. That's nice Darwinian stuff. Dennis, I see you have a hand up.
Yes, thanks, Johannes. I do a lot of work on games and using simulation games in teaching, specifically now for the international law, course that we're doing, and they have to play simulations of what advice to give for instance, a president. Can they go to war? Can't they? And so on. So it's nice just to see how you can move between the different knowledge type in your pre-learning that needs to happen, so that the more complex and knowledgeable stuff can be applied. And I think I like that where it's laid out nicely. If you don't mind, I'd love to use this as a resource to help lecturers also in the design of these activities, where they fit in to the overall learning path that the students have to go through to get your more complex understanding, etc.
Exactly. I see dear sweet Estelle Drysdale has put a link to the thing there for you in the chat. So the actual article is linked in the chat.
Okay. Thanks Estelle. Thanks, Johannes. I think we're out of time, guys. So we're going to have to move on. But that was really stimulating, and thank you very much.
Thanks.